Hi, it's Chris Morrow. I received an email from one of my subscribers on my website a few days ago asking me to discuss counter offers and what to do if you receive a counter offer. I was actually in this position fairly recently with a very senior candidate who um, ended up being in a position where he received a counter offer from his current employer. We'll call him Bob for the purposes of this story. That's not his real name, of course, but we'll go with Bob for this one. So Bob was in a situation where he really felt really engaged in his current role. He'd been there a number of years. He'd received several promotions, gone through the ranks for a period of 3 to 4 years. He had a lot of freedom from his current employer. A great team, really felt engaged in his role, and overall everything was absolutely rosy for a long time. However, that didn't change, unfortunately. Bob became less content in his role, less engaged. He had an issue with a couple of the senior managers in his area, so his boss and his boss's boss, if you like. And he thought the culture of the organisation was ultimately changing for the worse, unfortunately. So Bob did what anyone would do in that position, which is he started to look for a new job, and that's when we met. I introduced Bob to a role that really fitted his skills and experience very well. Bob got involved in the process. He went through probably 5 stages of interviews over a period of 4 months, which he met probably 6 or 7 different interviewers. He took part in presentations. He had a psychometric evaluation online at the end of the process, which lasted a good 2 hours. So he went through a lot of pain up until that point through the whole recruitment process, and ultimately came out on top. He was the preferred candidate in the end. They made him an offer which was in line with his salary and package expectations. He was really happy about that, so he accepted the offer, and everyone was really pleased. Now, when Bob went to hand his notice in at his current employer the next day, he was met with a lot of blank faces, a lot of shock. They evidently were not expecting Bob to be looking around, and later on that day, he was actually called into a meeting with his boss and his boss's boss, and they explained to Bob, in no uncertain terms, that they did not want to lose him. He was a very valued and very important member of the team. They offered him a bigger role, more responsibility, a larger team, a much larger salary, and that stopped Bob in his tracks for obvious reasons. But it did leave him confused because he was thinking, why didn't they give me this offer before I started looking around? And obviously confused as to what to do, because here he was faced with what I call the counter offer dilemma. He was all ready to leave, and then he was made a counter offer and he was stopped dead in his tracks. So he mulled that over for probably 24 hours, and then came back to me and said, "Chris, thank you very much, but could you please inform the prospective employer that I'll not be starting with him. I'm going to be accepting the counter offer." Now, I've seen this play out numerous times over my career. We're talking well over probably 24 times, and it's funny that the sequence of events that happen when someone receives a counter offer is actually very predictable when you've been in that situation for a number of times. Now, the first thing that happens is that if you use Bob's examples, Bob was still unhappy. His offer of a bigger job, as exciting as it was at the time, and once that excitement dies down and goes away, and you're left with the mundane day-to-day activities, the reason why you started looking around for a new job, 9 times out of 10 is still there. And for Bob, in Bob's case, it's this problem with his senior management and very much the culture of the organisation. Now, that won't change just because you've been made a counter offer, unfortunately. So so that's the first thing, is that the reason that you were looking around in the first place will probably still be there. So you'll still probably be unhappy in your role, despite being made that that counter offer. Now the second thing is very much around the trust issue. Bob, in the eyes of his current employer, is no longer trustworthy. He is and will always be the guy who was prepared to leave them in the lurch and go and find a new job, and that raises a trust issue in the eyes of the current employer. They will, without a shadow of a doubt, be looking around for Bob's replacement as soon as he handed his notice in. So that's another issue, number two. Number three is very much around integrity. Now, Bob's current employer will obviously know that Bob had accepted a role somewhere else and subsequently gone back on his word and accepted their counter offer. Now that is really badly affects your integrity in the eyes of your current employer, but also in the eyes of the prospective employer as well, who'll be feeling very, very dejected after a 3 or 4 month recruitment process, and after so much heartache when it comes to trying to find the right person. They think they've found the right person, and then you go back on your word. So integrity is the third point, and a very important one. But in my mind, the most important thing is number 4, which is you will still leave the organisation. You've set off a chain of events when you hand your notice in, and unfortunately, inevitably, you will leave the organisation. Now, that might not be in the next week, it might not be in the next month or 3 months, but you will still leave because of the points that I've mentioned previously, but especially because you'll still be unhappy in your current role more often than not, unfortunately. Now, in Bob's case, he was actually very, very lucky. He called me up 4 weeks down the track and said, "Chris, I think I've made a big mistake. Is there any chance that we could talk to the prospective employer again and see if I could take the role?" Now, luckily for Bob, miraculously in fact, because this hardly ever happens, the prospective employer was open to Bob taking up the position in the end, which he did. He did leave his current employer. He took up the new position with the prospective employer, and Bob is now very happy again. So I hope that was some good advice. If you haven't already, please subscribe to my YouTube channel. If you're watching this video anywhere other than on my website, please head over to chrismorrow.careers. I've got lots of videos and lots of tips around trying to improve your chances when looking for a new job. So please hit the like button. Please leave a comment. Let me know your thoughts. Email me any questions you have, and I will do my best to respond to them.